I learned the hard way that envy rarely announces itself with a roar. It arrives wearing a borrowed smile and the soft rustle of someone else's life. When I moved into Harbor House, the graduate dorm above the university's marine lab, I expected salt in the hallways, squeaky pipes, and the kind of friendships that grow from midnight ramen and shared deadlines. What I did not expect was a quiet war fought with notifications, staged coincidences, and the strange intimacy of watching your own reality being rewritten in someone else's hands. My name is Mira Alden, second-year ocean engineering, scholarship kid with an obsession for tidal turbines and a spreadsheet for everything. I had one anchor that never drifted, Jonah Rains, my partner since high school, now a first-year resident doctor at the city hospital. We didn't have time for grand dates, so we did something better. Every night, no matter how brutal our schedules were, we called. We didn't talk much about love. We talked about weather, lab accidents, patient stories he couldn't name, and the tiny things that made the day feel human again. That routine held me together the way a hull holds back the sea. My new roommate, Celine Mercer, appeared like a blessing on move-in day. She was all polished, charm, and curated softness, linen dresses, delicate rings, a laugh like wind chimes. She told me she'd transferred from an international program, said her parents traveled constantly, and acted as if she'd been raised in hotel lobbies and art galleries. Her luggage looked expensive but oddly inconsistent, like it was assembled from someone else's social media feed. I didn't judge. I was too busy trying to make my half of the room functional. On the second evening, I propped my phone on my desk for my call with Jonah. Celine chose that exact moment to reorganize her closet with the door wide open, strolling back and forth behind me wearing a silky robe that looked like it belonged in a perfume ad. I shifted the camera toward the wall, embarrassed and irritated. She didn't even blush. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said lightly, as if modesty were an outdated custom she'd heard about once. "I forget people can see behind you." It happened again the next night, and the next. She would stretch, do Pilates, or practice dances with dramatic arm sweeps that kept sliding into the frame. I tried to be patient. Sharing a room meant compromises, and I didn't want to be the uptight girl policing someone else's comfort, but the timing never felt accidental, and the way she watched my screen, just a glance, just a flicker made my skin prickle. A week later, Jonah was texting me between rounds when a new contact request popped up on his messaging app. The name was Celine Mercer, with a note. "Hi, Dr. Rains. I'm Mira's roommate. Nice to meet you." Jonah sent me a screenshot with a single line. "Is this normal?" My stomach sank. I had never given Celine Jonah's number. I'd never said more than, "My boyfriend is tired," or "My boyfriend is on night shift." Yet there she was, crossing a boundary, as if it were a decorative ribbon she could step over gracefully. Curiosity overruled caution. Jonah handed me his phone when he came by that weekend, his face drawn from sleep deprivation and stubborn loyalty. "You want to see what she wants?" "Take it," he said. "I'm not hiding anything." Jonah is gentle by default, but he's also blunt when he has to be, and he hates games. I accepted the request from Celine using Jonah's phone and waited. Her first message was a sticker, an exaggerated cartoon whale with hearts, one I used sometimes when I was too tired to type. Then came, "You two are so cute. Mira is lucky. I hope it's okay if I ask you for advice sometimes. It's hard being new." The next message arrived 3 seconds later. A selfie. She was wrapped in a towel with wet hair, the angle conveniently emphasizing skin and softness. 5 seconds after that, the photo vanished, replaced by, "Oops, wrong chat. Sorry." The apology was so bright, it was almost theatrical. I stared at Jonah. His eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "I don't even know how to respond to that," he murmured. I forced my fingers to type with deliberate calm. "No worries. What advice did you need?" She launched into a story about wanting volunteer hours, being overwhelmed by campus, needing guidance from someone responsible and ambitious. If I'd heard it out loud, maybe it would have sounded plausible. On a screen, it smelled like bait. I didn't accuse. I didn't scold. I saved every message, took screenshots, and replied like a bored administrative assistant. Jonah watched quietly, jaw tight, letting me lead because he understood what I needed. Proof, not drama. We didn't tell anyone. In dorms, stories mutate faster than algae blooms, and the first version becomes the truth, even if it's wrong. Celine escalated in small, almost elegant steps. She started accidentally walking into the room when I was on video, apologizing sweetly while lingering anyway. She asked me questions about Jonah's schedule, with the innocent insistence of someone just trying to be supportive. She started wearing perfume that trailed through our room like a signature. Then, at a class mixer by the marina, she appeared in the exact same shade of sea glass green dress I wore, down to the asymmetrical neckline. She acted delighted by the coincidence. I felt like a mirror someone had decided to stand in front of, blocking my reflection while claiming to admire it. My friend Tessa noticed. "Does she copy you?" she whispered. "Or is this a fashion thing I don't understand?" I shrugged, because the alternative was admitting I felt hunted, and I refused to grant that power. Jonah came to the mixer after a long shift, still in scrubs under his jacket, exhaustion in his shoulders but warmth in his eyes. When he saw me, he looked like he could breathe again. Celine's gaze snapped to him like a compass needle to north. She slid closer, laughing too loudly at someone's joke, turning her body so Jonah would have to notice. Jonah didn't. He walked straight to me, kissed my forehead, and asked if I'd eaten. Celine's smile held for a second too long, then cracked into something brittle. That night, Jonah's phone buzzed with a stream of messages from Celine. Photos of me leaning over the dock railing, mid-laugh, hair tangled by wind. Captions like, "Mira is so fearless, and you must worry about her a lot." Then a photo of herself, angled delicately against a lifebuoy, captioned, "I'm the opposite. I'm so scared of deep water." Weak, right? The pattern was obvious. Praise sharpened into comparison, comparison into insinuation. I replied once from Jonah's account, "Mira is fine. She's capable." Celine responded, "You're lucky. I wish I had someone protective like you. I've never had a boyfriend. I'm probably too quiet." The lie landed like an oily smear. Quiet people don't flood a stranger's inbox. Over the next days, she kept going. She asked Jonah what kind of women he liked, whether he wanted kids, whether he thought ambition was cold. She sprinkled my name like seasoning to make it seem friendly. Jonah let me handle the replies, but he was losing patience, and I could feel it in the way his breathing changed when his phone lit up. "I can block her," he offered. "We can end this now." "Not yet," I said. "If we end it now, she'll rewrite it. Let her keep talking." I needed enough evidence that no one could twist it into a misunderstanding. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. Celine tried a new tactic during midterms. Our cohort had a group project in the simulation lab, and by a cruel roll of the professor's spreadsheet, Celine ended up assigned to my team. She acted humble, brought coffee, took notes, praised my work. Then she began taking photos for the team archive. She claimed of me talking with Owen, a classmate who happened to be friendly and animated. The photos captured me smiling at Owen's laptop while he explained code. Within minutes, Jonah's phone received the images with, "Mira is so popular. She laughs so easily with him. I admire her confidence." The words carried an undercurrent like a riptide. "You should be jealous. You should doubt." Jonah texted me privately. "Is she trying to make me jealous with Owen?" He added a vomiting emoji, which, from Jonah, was basically a sonnet. I laughed once, sharply, because the absurdity was almost comforting. Celine's idea of sabotage was shallow, but she was persistent. That afternoon, another message arrived. "Sometimes women don't respect boundaries. I think Mira can be a bit possessive, right? Please don't tell her I said that." I took a screenshot, then wrote back, "Boundaries matter. Thanks." Celine replied with a heart. My hands shook as I typed, not from fear, but from anger at her audacity. If she had simply flirted, I could have dismissed it as pathetic, but she was planting narratives about me, molding me into the villain of her story, the jealous girlfriend who didn't understand innocent friendship. She wanted to steal Jonah and my reputation at the same time. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday, when I returned from lab to find my laptop open and warm. The project file was on the screen. A duplicate of my model sat in a new folder, renamed. My stomach dropped. Celine was at her desk, typing fast, eyes flicking to the door. I stepped behind her and saw my work, my weeks of careful calibration pasted into her report with minor cosmetic changes. "Celine," I said, voice flat, "why is my turbine model in your folder?" She froze, then spun toward me with a practiced expression of shock. "What? Mira, I was just looking at examples. We're teammates." "That's my file," I said. "It has my notes, my timestamps, my errors." Her eyes filled with tears so fast it looked like a stage trick. "I didn't steal anything," she whispered loudly enough for the hall to hear. Within minutes, 2 girls from down the corridor drifted in, drawn by the tension. Celine hid her face, shaking. "She thinks I'm a thief," she sobbed. "I'm trying so hard." The girls looked at me like I'd kicked a puppy. One murmured, "Mira, maybe it's a misunderstanding." Another said, "Celine's so sweet. She wouldn't do that." It wasn't about facts. It was about performance. Celine had been offering them skincare samples, helping carry boxes, laughing at their jokes. She had invested in goodwill the way some people invest in stocks. I breathed slowly, refusing to be baited into yelling. "We can check the file metadata," I said. "We can check version history." Celine sniffed. "Sure," she said, too quickly. "Check whatever you want." The resident advisor showed up, then the lab coordinator, then our professor, summoned by a chain of messages. The professor frowned at the laptop, uncomfortable. "Mira, Celine comes from a reputable program," he said carefully. "Are you sure you want to escalate this? Scholarships are competitive." The implication was clear. I was the poor kid, desperate and suspicious. She was the glossy transfer student, above petty theft. My cheeks burned, but I refused to bow. "Yes," I said. "I'm sure. Escalate it." Celine's gaze flickered just a flash of alarm, then she buried it under another tear. That night, Jonah came to campus with a thermos of soup and a look that could have cut steel. "Tell me where she lives," he said. "I just want to talk." "You'll scare her," I replied, "and she'll call it harassment." Jonah exhaled, then handed me his phone again. "Then let's do it your way," he said, "but I'm not letting her bruise you." We made a plan. Not a dramatic trap, not a social media explosion. A clean, documented sequence that would be hard to distort. First, we gathered data. I pulled version histories and timestamps from my cloud backups. Jonah saved every message Celine had sent, including the wrong chat towel photo that he never should have received. Tessa, who had watched Celine copy my outfits and follow my movements, offered to help. She started paying attention in public spaces, noting times, collecting small observations with a journalist's calm. Then something else surfaced. The Marine Lab runs on grant money, and every summer a private foundation funds a prestigious fellowship. It isn't just money, it's access, mentorship, future doors. I had applied months ago, believing my work had a real chance. The night before interviews, my email account flagged a login from an unknown device. I changed my password, but unease crawled along my spine. The next day, in the waiting area outside the interview room, I saw Celine in a crisp blazer, hair immaculate, holding a folder identical to mine. She glanced at me and smiled as if we were friends. "Good luck," she said, voice sugar-sweet. "May the best girl win." The phrase sounded like a blessing and a threat. The interview went well. I left with cautious hope. 2 days later, the fellowship committee emailed. "We regret to inform you." No explanation, just polite rejection. That should have been the end, but my advisor, Dr. Liao, called me into her office with a strange expression. "Mira," she said, "did you send a message to the committee chair last night?" My pulse spiked. "No," I said. "Why?" "Doctor." Liao turned her screen toward me. An email, from my account, had arrived at 2:17 a.m. It accused the chair of favoritism, threatened a lawsuit, and attached a document full of plagiarized paragraphs. My throat went dry. "That isn't mine," I whispered. "Doctor," Liao studied my face, then nodded once, slow and decisive. "I believe you," she said, "but we need proof. Proof. Always proof." I walked back to Harbor House, feeling like the walls had narrowed. Celine was in our room, humming, painting her nails. The scent of acetone curled through the air. "Everything okay?" she asked casually. I stared at her hands' perfect cuticles, steady strokes. "Someone accessed my email," I said. "It cost me a fellowship." Celine's brush paused for a fraction of a second. Then she resumed, unbothered. "That's terrible," she murmured. "Hackers are everywhere." She didn't look at me. That night, Jonah and I met in the empty study lounge and mapped out what we knew. The email was sent from my account, but I hadn't sent it. The attachment included phrasing from a draft I'd once shared with my roommate folder. Celine had access to that shared folder because she'd insisted on helping me stay organized. I had agreed because I wanted peace. Now my kindness had become a key in her pocket. Jonah rubbed his eyes, jaw clenched. "We need to stop thinking like victims," he said. "We need to think like investigators." So we did. I contacted campus IT and requested access logs from my account. I asked politely, formally, with Dr. Liao copied in. I installed two-factor authentication on everything. I changed every password and removed Celine from every shared folder. Then, without telling her, I set a bait document in a new folder labeled Fellowship Appeal Draft. The file contained a unique phrase, an absurd sentence about octopuses judging human ambition from the shadows. If that phrase ever appeared anywhere else, I would know exactly where it came from. Meanwhile, Jonah adjusted his approach. Instead of blocking Celine, he stopped responding entirely. Silence, I learned, can be louder than any insult. Within a day, Celine panicked. She messaged him. "Did Mira take your phone? Please answer. I'm worried about you." Jonah didn't reply. She followed with, "I feel like Mira hates me. I never wanted to come between you." Again, no reply. The next evening, I found Celine in the hallway outside the dorm's common kitchen, talking to a guy from the physics floor, laughing too loudly. When she spotted me, she tilted her head, as if she'd just remembered I existed. "Mira," she called, "we should talk. I think there's been a misunderstanding." I smiled without warmth. "Sure," I said. "Let's talk with the resident director present." Her smile faltered. "That's unnecessary," she said. "Is it?" I replied. 2 days later, the IT logs came in. My account had been accessed from a campus device in the dorm at 211A, and the same time the fake email had been sent. The IP address mapped to the wireless hub on our floor. That wasn't enough to prove it was Celine, but it tightened the circle. Then Tessa delivered a gift, a photo she'd taken by accident. She had been recording a silly video in the hallway late at night when Celine stepped out of our room holding my laptop, whispering into her phone. The footage wasn't crystal clear, but the laptop sticker, a small silver turbine I'd designed, was unmistakable. My hands went cold when I watched it. "Is that enough?" Tessa asked. "It's something," I said, "but she'll call it coincidence." We needed one clean strike. The chance arrived sooner than I expected. A letter appeared in my mailbox, an invitation to a networking gala hosted by the same foundation that funded the fellowship. Attendance was limited. Students could bring one guest. It was the kind of room where careers are decided in small conversations near expensive appetizers. Jonah arranged time off. He wanted to be there, not because he cared about the gala, but because he cared about watching me reclaim space that had been stolen. The night of the gala, Celine appeared in our room, wearing a shimmering navy dress and a grin. "Isn't it funny?" she said. "I got invited too. I didn't ask how. I didn't need to." She twirled, letting the fabric catch the light. "Maybe we'll both impress someone important," she added, eyes gleaming. "Maybe everything will work out." Her words sounded like a promise to herself. At the venue, the air was cool and perfumed, the kind of elegance that tries to make you forget money exists. Jonah looked out of place in his simple suit, but he carried himself like a man used to high stakes. We were talking with Dr. Liao when Celine approached, holding a flute of champagne like a prop. "Dr. Liao," she purred. "I'm so grateful you've mentored Mira. She speaks of you constantly." Dr. Liao's eyes narrowed slightly. "Does she?" she said. Celine's smile didn't flinch. "Mira is lucky," she continued, turning her gaze to Jonah. "And Jonah, you too. Mira is intense, but brilliant," she said, intense the way someone says difficult. Jonah's mouth tightened. "Mira is Mira," he said. "That's the point." Celine laughed lightly, then leaned closer as if sharing a secret. "I admire your patience," she whispered. She meant to sting me. Instead, she gave me another piece of her pattern, flattering the man while undermining the woman. I excused myself and drifted toward the balcony overlooking the harbor. The water below reflected city lights like scattered coins. My breath steadied. Then my phone vibrated with an email notification. Subject: Appeal Draft. Sender: Celine Mercer. My heart thumped. I opened it. Attached was a document. Fellowship Appeal Draft. In the body, she wrote, "Mira, I found this in your folder. I thought you'd want feedback. Also, I sent a copy to Mr. Harrington from the foundation because he offered to help." My hands went numb. There, in black and white, was the octopus sentence. She had taken the bait. She had also confessed casually, proudly to sending my draft to a Foundation contact without permission. That alone was unethical. Combined with the access logs and Tessa's video, it was a chain. I didn't react publicly. I walked back inside, found Dr. Liao, and showed her the email. Dr. Liao's expression turned glacial. "Where is she?" she asked. I pointed. Celine was across the room, smiling at an older man in a tuxedo, Mr. Harrington, judging by the name tag. She was touching his sleeve lightly, performing gratitude. Dr. Liao moved like a storm with a calm center. She approached Harrington and spoke quietly. His smile faded. Celine's eyes darted toward me, then back to him. Jonah took my hand, squeezing once, steadying me. Within minutes, the Foundation's event coordinator appeared, followed by the campus compliance officer who happened to be an alumnus. I watched the small group tighten around Celine like a net. She tried to laugh it off. She tried tears. She tried confusion. But the email sat there, time-stamped, undeniable. Her polished demeanor cracked. I was helping. She insisted, voice rising. She needed me. She doesn't even know how these people work. Harrington's face hardened. "You sent a student's private draft without consent," he said. "Do you understand confidentiality?" Celine stammered. You thought you could attach yourself to her work," Dr. Liao interrupted softly. "And you thought you could sabotage her when she didn't thank you for it." Celine's eyes flashed with something ugly. "She has everything," she hissed, too loud now. "She has the scholarship, the boyfriend, the mentors. She doesn't even appreciate it. I just wanted a chance." The room around her went quiet. People pretend not to listen, but they always listen when a mask falls. Jonah stepped forward then, calm and clear. "A chance doesn't require theft," he said. "A chance doesn't require lying." Celine looked at him, desperate, almost pleading. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Mira would never." "Stop," Jonah said, voice firm. "Don't use her name as a ladder." Something in his tone made her flinch. The coordinator asked Celine to leave. She refused until security appeared. As she was escorted out, she turned and pointed at me, trembling with rage. "You set me up," she spat. I met her gaze steadily. "I gave you opportunities to stop," I said. "You chose to keep going." After the gala, Dr. Liao walked me to the exit. "We'll fix the fellowship decision," she promised, not as a favor, as a correction. The next week unfolded with a surreal speed. It confirmed additional unauthorized access attempts from devices registered to Celine. The dorm director reviewed Tessa's hallway footage. The lab coordinator compared project files and found evidence of copy-paste patterns that matched Celine's submissions. A formal inquiry began. Rumors swirled, as they always do. But for once the rumors aligned with truth because the truth had receipts. Celine tried to counterattack. She posted on a student forum that I had bullied her, that Jonah had led her on, that professors favored me because I was connected. It would have worked if my life had been built on charisma. But my life was built on documentation. We responded, not with insults, but with an official statement from the department noting that misconduct was under review and urging students not to spread misinformation. The statement didn't name her, but everyone understood. Then Dr. Liao, quietly relentless, submitted the evidence to the Foundation. 2 weeks later, I received a new email. "We apologize for the earlier decision. Your application will be reconsidered." Another week after that, I got the call. I had the fellowship, not because someone saved me, but because the system, for once, corrected itself when faced with clear proof. Celine, meanwhile, withdrew from the university. The official language was personal reasons. The dorm director told me privately that her enrollment documents had inconsistencies, credits that didn't transfer cleanly, claims that didn't match records. Her identity had been as curated as her wardrobe. On the day she moved out, she left behind a small box on her desk. Inside were photos she had printed of my social media posts, screenshots of Jonah's profile, a list of Foundation contacts written neatly in a notebook, and a cheap imitation of my turbine sticker. It wasn't a gift. It was a relic of obsession. I handed the box to the dorm director without opening anything else. That night, Jonah and I sat on the dorm balcony, watching fog creep over the harbor. He looked tired in the way that comes from holding anger in check for too long. "I hated not ending it sooner," he admitted. "I hated watching her try to twist you." I leaned my head against his shoulder. I hated it too, I said. But if we'd ended it early, she would have stayed the heroine in her own version. Now she has to live with the fact that she wrote her confession. Jonah chuckled, a quiet sound. You weaponized an octopus, he said, amazed. I laughed, the sound spilling out like relief. Don't underestimate cephalopods, I replied. Our routines returned. My project regained its focus. The dorm felt lighter, as if the air had stopped anticipating drama. Still, I carried a new awareness. Like a scar you only notice when the weather changes, I stopped assuming kindness would be understood. I started setting boundaries as if they were essential components of structural integrity, because they were. Months later, on the morning of my fellowship presentation, I stood in the lecture hall with a laser pointer in one hand and my notes in the other. The room was full. Students, faculty, foundation representatives, even a few hospital staff Jonah had coaxed into attending on their day off. My slides showed tidal charts, turbine efficiency curves, and a prototype designed to withstand debris and storms. When I finished, applause rose in a wave that made my throat tighten. Jonah met me afterward, eyes bright. You did it, he said simply, like a vow. I thought about the version of me from move-in day, eager and trusting, willing to excuse discomfort to keep peace. I didn't hate her. I understood her. She wanted harmony, and she believed people wanted it too. Now I knew better. Harmony is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of honesty. On the walk back to Harbor House, Jonah squeezed my hand. Dinner? He asked. Real dinner, I said. No cafeteria soup. And you're not allowed to pretend you can cook pasta without reading the instructions. Jonah grinned, feigning offense. I am a professional. I can boil water. That's what worries me, I teased. The harbor wind tugged at my hair, cool and sharp, but the day felt warm anyway. Somewhere behind us, the dorm windows reflected the sky. I didn't look up to see who was watching. I didn't need to. My life was mine again. Not because I'd won a contest for a man's attention, but because I had defended my work, my name, and the quiet love that had survived years of distance and exhaustion. Envy, I realized, doesn't disappear when confronted. It simply loses the shadows it needs to grow. And in bright light, even the most practiced performance begins to look like what it always was. A costume stitched from wanting what you refuse to earn. Spring arrived with the kind of hesitant sunlight that makes every puddle look like possibility. The fellowship required a summer placement, and the foundation offered 3 sites: a wind farm off the northern coast, a river restoration lab inland, and an experimental wave energy platform near a small island town. I chose the wave platform because it was the most technically chaotic, and because chaos, unlike gossip, could be engineered. Jonah couldn't come. His residency schedule was a maze with no exits. We promised each other we would keep our nightly calls, even if they turned into 3 minutes between his pager alarms and my field reports. On my last night before departure, I packed sensor kits and waterproof notebooks while Jonah sat cross-legged on my bed, reading the island's emergency guidelines like he was about to attend a disaster as a hobby. Rip currents, he muttered. Jellyfish. Hypothermia. You're romantically involved with hazards. I'm romantically involved with data, I corrected. The hazards are just part of the package. He made a face and kissed the back of my hand. Text me when you land, he said. Then text me when you breathe. The ferry to the island was slow, chopping through pale morning water. The platform sat beyond the harbor like a piece of machinery that had wandered into the ocean and decided to stay. My team consisted of 2 engineers, a technician named Raoul, who could fix anything with duct tape and profanity, and a doctoral student from another university, Lena, who had the blunt, no-nonsense humor of someone who'd learned to be underestimated and stopped caring. We worked long days installing sensors, calibrating pressure systems, and running stress tests while gulls screamed overhead like tiny tyrants. At night, I called Jonah from the narrow bunk cabin, whispering because the walls were thin. He told me about a patient who kept asking for his dog, about the nurse who smuggled him candy, about his hands shaking after a difficult procedure. I told him about sea spray crusting on cables, about a SEAL that kept inspecting our gear like a union rep, about my own hands turning rough from salt and bolts. The calls weren't glamorous, but they were intimate in the truest way. We were choosing to keep showing up for each other when it would have been easier to collapse. 2 weeks into the placement, I received a message from an unknown number. Mira, it's Celine. My stomach tightened as if my body remembered her before my brain could. The next line appeared. Please don't block me. I need to explain. I stared at the phone. I hadn't thought about her for months except as a cautionary tale. The island wind rattled the cabin window. I typed, You shouldn't have my number. She replied immediately. I'm sorry. I found it in an old roommate file. I know that sounds bad. I know everything sounds bad. That admission alone was a reminder of how she operated. Boundary first, apology later. I didn't answer. Jonah called right then, his timing uncanny, and I let his voice wash the irritation out of me. After we hung up, I saw more messages waiting. I lost everything, Celine wrote. I'm not asking you to feel sorry. I'm asking you to understand. Then, I didn't want Jonah. Not really. I wanted what you had with him. That line landed differently. It wasn't an excuse. It was a confession. I could feel the impulse to argue, to list her betrayals like a ledger. Instead, I set the phone down and let the moment pass like a wave. The next day, during a calibration dive, a sudden swell twisted the platform's ladder, slamming it into the side rail. Raoul shouted, Lena swore, and my harness jerked hard enough to bruise. In that instant, the petty sabotage of dorm life felt distant and small, yet it also felt connected. Danger doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's a loose rung. Sometimes it's a smiling person with access to your passwords. That evening, while Lena and I checked the damage, she asked casually, You ever have someone try to take credit for your work? I snorted. You mean besides every second funding board that assumes the man in the room built the project? Lena smiled grimly. Fair point. I hesitated, then told her a condensed version of Celine. Lena listened without interruption, then said, People like that don't want your boyfriend. They want your proof of life. They want the evidence that it's possible to be valued. She adjusted a bolt with sharp precision. But you can't donate your life to fix their hunger. I remembered her words later when another message from Celine came through. I'm in the city again. I saw Jonah at the hospital. My fingers went cold. Don't contact him, I typed, fast and hard. Do not go near him. She responded. I didn't talk to him. I just saw him. He looked tired. I felt guilty. Guilt, I thought, was a thin bridge that sometimes appeared after a person burned every other path. I wasn't obligated to cross it. I forwarded the message to Jonah and to the campus compliance officer who'd handled the earlier inquiry. Then I silenced Celine's number. Boundaries like bulkheads exist for a reason. The summer ended with a storm that turned the ocean into hammered steel. The platform's sensors held. The prototype survived. When we returned to mainland, the Foundation director shook my hand and said, Your resilience is as valuable as your design. I didn't tell him resilience had been forced on me by a girl with a borrowed wardrobe and a talent for poisoning rooms. I just thanked him, because the work was mine. Back on campus, I moved out of Harbor House and into a small apartment with Tessa and Lena, who decided to transfer and join our lab. We painted the living room a pale, optimistic blue and bought mismatched mugs from a thrift store. The new place felt like a home because no one in it treated my peace as negotiable. Jonah visited when he could, bringing hospital stories and an aura of stubborn exhaustion. One night, while we cooked noodles that actually tasted like food, he paused with chopsticks midair and said, I got an email from someone. My heart stuttered. Celine? I asked. Jonah nodded. She wrote a long apology, he said. She said she's in therapy. She said she understands now that she was chasing a fantasy. She asked me to tell you she's sorry. I leaned back, letting the tension drain slowly. Do you believe her? I asked. Jonah considered. I believe she believes it, he said carefully. Right now. He met my eyes. But belief isn't the same thing as trust. I nodded, grateful for his clarity. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to water simmer. Then Jonah added, half joking, Also, she said she hates octopuses. I laughed, startled. She found out about that? Apparently, he said, and his smile softened. Your octopus has become a legend. The following semester, I was invited to speak at the freshman orientation about academic integrity and digital safety. The irony made me want to laugh and scream at the same time. I stood on stage, looked at a sea of new faces, and told them what I wished someone had told me early, that privacy isn't paranoia, that generosity needs limits, that you can be kind without being accessible. I didn't name Celine. I didn't need to. Patterns don't require a villain's name to be recognized. After the talk, a first-year student approached me, eyes wide. "Thank you," she said softly. "My roommate keeps borrowing my laptop. I thought I was being dramatic." I shook my head. "You're being careful," I said, and careful is allowed. Winter arrived with crisp mornings and the first dusting of snow on the harbor cranes. Jonah's residency rotation shifted to surgery, which meant even fewer hours, and sometimes our nightly calls became voice notes sent at odd times. Yet every message, no matter how short, carried the same promise. "I'm here. I'm still choosing you." One evening, I found a small envelope slipped under our apartment door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with handwriting I recognized from Celine's old notes. "I'm leaving the state. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm only saying I'm done stealing. I hope you keep building things that outlast storms." There was no signature. I stared at the words for a long time, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. She had been my antagonist, yes, but she had also been a person shaped by some unnamed hunger. I folded the paper and put it in a drawer, not as a keepsake but as a reminder. Some endings are quiet, and quiet can be merciful. On the last night of the year, Jonah and I stood on the pier as fireworks cracked over the water. He had managed a rare full evening off, and his presence felt like a miracle. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, chin resting on my shoulder. "You know," he said, voice low, "I used to think love was the big gestures, the surprise trips, the flowers, the dramatic speeches. I watched the colors scatter across the waves. And now?" I asked. Jonah kissed my temple. "Now I think love is letting someone see you when you're tired and scared and still showing up anyway," he said. "It's you saving screenshots at 2 a.m. It's me trusting you to handle a storm without turning it into a spectacle." I leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "We're not glamorous," I said. "We're durable." Jonah laughed. "Durable is hot," he declared. I rolled my eyes, but I was smiling. Somewhere out there, the ocean kept moving, indifferent to human dramas, but also generous in its own way. It always offered a new horizon, if you were willing to navigate. I had learned to steer with clearer boundaries, sharper instincts, and a quieter confidence. Not everyone who wants your life wants you well. Not everyone who calls you intense is wrong, either. Sometimes intensity is just the courage to insist that your work, your love, and your name are not community property. And when you finally stop apologizing for protecting what you've built, you realize something startling. The light you were afraid to shine on conflict is the same light that makes your future visible. The next spring, my turbine project won a National Student Design Award, which meant a flight to a conference in a city I'd only seen in medical dramas. Jonah couldn't attend, but he watched the live stream on a hospital computer between cases, and later he sent me a photo of the screen with my tiny figure on stage and a sticky note taped beside it that read, "That's my person." I kept that note in my wallet like a secret talisman. At the conference, strangers shook my hand and asked for collaborations, and for a moment I felt the dizzying unreality of being visible for the right reasons. During a panel on ethics in research, a speaker said, "Integrity is what you do when no one is watching." I thought about the dorm hallway, the stolen files, the bait sentence, the chain of proof. I thought about how integrity had not only saved my scholarship, it had saved my sanity. When I returned, Dr. Liao called me into her office and slid a folder across the desk. "Industry partners want to license your design," she said. "You'll be listed as the primary inventor." My throat tightened. "Me?" I asked stupidly, as if the months of labor had belonged to someone else. Dr. Liao's smile was small but proud. "Yes, you," she said, "and this is why boundaries matter. People will try to borrow your brilliance without paying. Make them pay." That summer, Jonah and I finally took a real vacation. 2 days in a cabin by a freshwater lake with no reception unless you climbed a hill. We cooked on a tiny stove, argued about how to set up a tent, and fell asleep early because exhaustion is honest. On the second night, Jonah handed me a small box. My first instinct was suspicion after Celine. Surprise gifts had felt like traps. Jonah noticed my hesitation and laughed softly. "It's not a test," he said. "It's a question." Inside was a simple ring. Not flashy, not performative, just steady. Like him. "Mira," he said, voice rough, "I don't promise you an easy life. I promise you a life where we don't lie to each other, I promise you a life where we back each other up when the world gets weird. I blinked hard, because my eyes did that thing they do when feelings are too big. Are you proposing like a research grant application? I managed. Jonah grinned, embarrassed and earnest at once. Yes, he admitted, with measurable outcomes and a long-term plan. I laughed, then nodded, then cried, then kissed him so hard we almost knocked over the stove. When we returned to campus, I walked through the old dorm corridor once, just to feel how different it was. The floor smelled the same, but my body didn't tense. The space that had once held anxiety now felt like a museum room I could leave at will. I paused outside the door that had been ours and listened to the muffled music inside someone else's life, someone else's mess. I wished those strangers a gentler roommate than I'd had, then kept walking. On my graduation day, Tessa and Lena screamed loud enough to make nearby parents laugh. Dr. Liao hugged me with brief fierceness. Jonah stood in the crowd, still in scrubs because he'd come straight from the hospital, and his eyes looked bright and tired and impossibly proud. After the ceremony, we took photos by the harbor with caps in our hands and wind whipping our gowns. My father, who rarely displayed emotion, pulled me aside and said quietly, "You handled yourself well." It was the closest he ever got to an apology for not being able to shield me from everything. I squeezed his hand and said, "I learned." Later, at our small celebration dinner, Jonah raised a glass and said, "To Mira, who can out-engineer storms and out-document nonsense." Everyone laughed,